In this module, we're going to learn how to create an animation that follows a path. So we have a new scene open up here in Maya, and you can find this exact same scene within your project files. And what we have is our UFO rig. So anytime you're tasked with creating some type of vehicle animation, for example, maybe it's a car driving down a road or even train on a train track or something like a roller coaster. That's going to be a type of animation that is really difficult to hand key or create all of that animation by hand. For example, if you have a roller coaster flying down a track or maybe even a car just driving down the road, you know that animation needs to be extremely smooth. It typically also needs to travel at some sort of constant speed or more of a constant speed, so you can't have your spacing really jumping all over the place because that's going to create really jerky animation. And something like a vehicle, it'll look really weird. And in our case, this UFO spaceship. So what we can do is utilize Maya's path constraint to first specify the path that we want an object to follow and use that constraint to actually sort of snap that object to the path itself and allow Maya to do a lot of the heavy lifting for us. So let's go ahead and go over that process. So the first thing that we need to do is first create a path that we want an object to follow. In this case, our spaceship here. So what we'll do first is we'll go ahead and jump to the top view. So we'll go to Panels, Orthographic, and choose the top view. And we basically want to now create a path for this spaceship to follow. So we'll go up here to Create, Curve Tools, and we'll use the CV Curve tool. We can go to the option box if we need to and reset the tool and make sure that the curve degree is set to 3 cubic. And then we'll go ahead and close that. And we can go ahead and hold X down to snap to one of the grid points, and we might snap it right above, or excuse me, right in front of our UFO, so something like that. And then we might hold X again and then snap it further down the line, maybe something like this, to make sure that we start with more of a straight line there. And then we might just go ahead and get creative with the path that we want this UFO to follow. So really, we can start dropping in points around here to create the basic motion that we want this UFO to follow. So we can have really wide arcing turns there that we want this UFO to take. We can maybe swing it back around and have it kind of do this loop back toward this direction. So we'll go ahead and just commit that path. That's a very basic path that'll work just fine. We'll go ahead and just hit W to go back to our move tool to commit that path. And then we might go ahead and go to maybe the side view. And we could just bring this up just in line with more of the UFO because it was snapped right to the grid there. And our UFO is actually by default above the basic grid line. So we might just bring it up to something like that. And that's perfectly fine. So you can see the path that our UFO is taking. Now, of course, if you want to, you could right click this curve and go to Control Vertex, and you can move these points around anywhere you want. You could grab a group of points and then maybe move them down. So the UFO is going to travel down and then back up. You can really get creative with the curve for your UFO to follow. We'll go ahead and just undo that and just keep it sort of a flat, straight line here, sort of lined up straight. So we don't have any kind of curves or vertices offset. But we do have a nice curving motion in the path itself. So we'll go ahead and go to object mode now. All right. So now we want to actually have this UFO follow the path that we created. It's a really simple process. So first we'll select the ship control object, and then we want to make sure that we're in the animation menu set. And then we're going to go over here to Constraint. And then we have the motion path, and you can see that we have the option to attach it to a motion path. We need to go ahead and now select the motion path that we want this UFO to follow. In this case, it's the curve that we just created. So we'll hold Shift down and select it. And then we'll go back to Constraint, motion paths, attach to motion path, and then open up the option box. And then we'll go ahead and go to edit and reset our settings. So we have a couple different options in here. We have the option to create this animation and have this animate the length of our time slider. Currently our time slider is set to 150 frames, and that's just fine. We'll go ahead and actually keep this set to time slider, but you see you have the option to adjust things like the start and end time if you want to specify the exact length that you want this animation. But for now, we'll just keep it set on the time slider settings. And then we have a couple options down here. So we have the option to adjust the front axis and the up axis. Now you can see that our front axis, or the forward axis for this UFO, is going to be the x-axis. You can see that the x-axis is going to basically move our UFO forward in space. And then we also have the up axis is going to be y. So by default, these settings are going to work just fine, but it also depends on the object or rig that you're using. So you want to make sure and pay attention to your up axis and your front axis. What is the axis that is going to bring your rig forward in space? In our case, in this rig, it's the x-axis. So that'll work just fine. And all of these settings by default are going to work great. So let's go ahead and just hit attach. And you can see that now it's snapped our UFO to the motion path curve. And now we can go ahead and hit play and see what happens. So you can see that now we have this spaceship following exactly along with the path itself without having us really do any type of hand key animation. And just looking at this, you can really understand sort of the headache that this type of motion would cause if you were going to try and hand key all of this animation by hand. Making sure that what we have here, you can see that it's an extremely smooth motion on our UFO. Trying to create this by hand, it's going to be nearly impossible to make sure that we have a really nice smooth motion to our animation, which is what we get using this motion path constraint. Of course, you could do it by hand, but it would be really, really difficult to get something this smooth. And you can see we're able to do it in just a few minutes without having to do really any animation on our part. So you can see that by attaching it, we get a basic animation, but there's actually a lot that we can do inside the actual motion path constraint. So in the next clip, we're going to go over some of the options that we can use to create more to this animation and add more to this flying animation that we see here. So we'll go ahead and do that in the next clip.